In this video course, we're going to go through a little bit more detail into selling and the process that you go through, in particular around questioning, because it's one thing to be talking in a sales environment, but it's actually more impactful and more valuable if you are asking questions. So spending time finding out the customer problem and finding out the sales levers, the things that are going to move them across the line. Sales is a process of facilitation. These days, most information is available online, and someone's probably already watched 5, 10, 15, 20 videos on the topic, read 100 reviews before they even bother pulling out their credit card. And generally, most people have made that decision on what they're going to buy, if they're okay with the features, and they're really just trying to find out the finer details. So they may be coming to you to narrow down between two options or something like that. So the sales process should be more consultative, and you should be there to listen and you understand the challenges that they have with the product. Is it that the pricing isn't right? Is it that the timing isn't right? Is it that they don't understand a particular feature, no matter how much they've researched? And the process of them asking, or you asking them questions, is really just to find out, because sometimes they're not always sure themselves what the problem is. And you can start to really identify what it is that's the real driver behind making that decision. And the thing you want to do is give them confidence. No one likes sleazy sales tactics. Everybody's seen the whole used car sales approach, or the approach where you're trying to almost trick them into the sale. I think these days most customers are very informed on the process and on the products. And so a salesperson can really be effective by getting them to feel the right emotions, to trigger the right thought pattern before they get to the point of sale. To say, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would this improve your life? Perhaps you could even ask something like, if this was free, would you take the product? Yes. So that could be a price objection overcome, is that if someone says it's too expensive, to say, well, it's not, though it's not valuable, like you would pay something for it. And, how much would it cost you to not have this solution? Maybe it's going to cost you a lot more in time, energy, and effort doing it the hard way instead of buying this tool or this product to solve that problem. So getting deep down into the decision cycle and really understanding that driver is really what the questioning mode is all about. Sometimes the customer doesn't even realize what their sales drivers are, and being reflective to what they're saying can actually be quite helpful. So if they say something like, I am struggling with the price, to say, I'm hearing that you're not sure if this is a valuable product or if this is going to really solve your problem, or you're unsure about something. But it's not as though that the price is a complete objection. Maybe that's just an example of what's coming to the surface, or maybe they're saying, I'm busy this week, or coming up with excuses and they're not actually giving you the answer. There's something deep down there and you need to dig in a little bit to find out exactly what it is. One objection I heard recently was, we need to go and talk to the other stakeholders. And if you're particularly in a B2B selling environment, and maybe the stakeholder could be the partner, or it could be the business partner, or the romantic partner, or something like that. And you don't want to be going through secondary channels. You don't want your value to be communicated by somebody else, because it's not going to be the same. It's going to be watered down and the quality is not going to be there. If, however, you happen to be in the meeting with those other stakeholders, and you can say, can I join that meeting? I don't think you're going to be able to answer the questions the way I'm going to be able to answer them. Can I be in that meeting? And that will give you the power to be able to sell your value without having somebody else as an intermediary who, there might be internal politics and they get shut down because of that. There might be some other emotive driver or something else that comes up and it's all of a sudden not as important as a problem to solve just because you weren't there. So if you're there, they're there to meet you. They're there to understand what value you bring. And so that makes it a lot easier for you to sell if you're doing it in your own words, if you're able to answer the questions a little bit more on the fly, with a bit more detail, with a bit more authority, then you're more likely to kill off that buyer objection. And that's the whole point of sales. That's the whole point of asking questions, is to kill off buyer objection. Ideally, you've done as much of that as possible before they've gotten to the sale. You do this through social proof. You do this through the FAQs section on the sales page. these are the questions that other people had. Is there a refund policy? What happens if I can't return it? What happens if this? What happens if that? And those are buyer objections that will slow you down in the sales process. So if you can get them to have observed or read through that or dealt with that problem before they've gotten into the sales conversation, then you're in a much better position. So before you get into the stakeholder conversation, it can be important to figure out if that person is qualified fully. So the acronym is BANT: budget, authority to make decision, need, and timeline. If they don't have those 4 things, then more than likely they're not qualified. So that's where it says authority to make decision. So are you the decision maker? No, I'm not. Okay. Who needs to make the decision? Who needs to know? Let's go present to them. I can give you a bit of information now, but what I really want to do is go and talk to the right person, because you as the salesperson have priorities. You've got lots of other sales calls to make. You've got lots of other things to do. So you want to make sure your time is valuable. And you can also say, look, I don't think we're going to be effective in this meeting. Would you like to reschedule? I would much rather be able to give my pitch or my spiel to someone who is in a position to say yes. So the B in BANT is budget. And understanding if they've got the budget to actually take on your services is just as important. If you say, hey, look, my services normally go between this and that, and they go, oh no, we have absolutely no money for that. Or maybe they might go, too cheap, we don't think that you're able to deliver. It's actually important for you to establish that you're coming in at the right level. You don't want to come in too expensive and they get the sticker shock. Ideally, you'll have communicated quality in advance, or maybe you communicated low cost in advance, in which case you need to be clear on that as much as possible before you get into the meeting, rather than have them go, oh, no, way out of our budget, there's the door. So make sure that you are spending your time more effectively by qualifying as early as possible. The other one is need. So if they don't have a need for your product, then they're not likely to buy. If it's just like a nice to have to say, oh yeah, we also feel like we want this, then it's not as powerful as we really need this product to survive or to function or to be able to operate as a business. So the budget, if they don't have the money, if they don't have the authority, if they don't have the need, they're not going to buy. And if they do have all of those things and they've got plenty of money, they've got the right person in front of you, they absolutely need your product, but they don't have a timeline, then your deal is at risk. They basically don't have a go date as to when they need to address this by. If there's no urgency, it'll just get parked. We'll be like, yep, that's important, great. Yes, we want it. It's not a priority right now, so we'll just push it to the back of the pile. So if you have some way to say, look, if you get in before this date, I've got a price rise coming up at the end of the quarter, I'd really like to sign you off before I have to raise the prices. Or perhaps they're saying, like, if you sign off now, I can get it delivered in 6 weeks instead of 15 or something like that. Whatever the sales lever is that you can use to generate some level of scarcity, if they don't have a timeline, you can sort of create one. But if they don't really care about a timeline, then they're not really ready to address the problem. Now, getting back to the stakeholder conversation, quite often if you're selling to a business, you're dealing with a buying team. These are a group of people coming together, and you've got typically 5 main buyer roles: the influencer, the decision maker, the gatekeeper, the finance, and the user. So those positions within the sales team can exist in one person just as much as they can exist in 2, 3, 4, or 5 people, or more sometimes. So that means that if I'm going to walk into the shop and decide whether or not to buy a chocolate bar, that I'm both the gatekeeper, the financial, the decision maker, etc., all in one. And I'm convincing myself, do I need to eat that? Yeah, I really want it, but I don't think I can spare the cash. So it's really about the role, not necessarily the human or the individual. But it is important to establish who is on the buying team, understand their role. That helps you to communicate with them a lot better. So for example, you might make the influencer really excited about a particular thing. At the same token, you might try to fight off all of the roadblocks and problems with the gatekeeper. And then you might make really clear the finances to the finance person to say, well, yes, it costs this much, but this is what you're going to get and this is what you'll save. It's a slightly different conversation with each person, but it really does make a difference if you can tailor those conversations to what those individuals are listening for. What I did to help you understand what the budget is for this organization or what they ultimately want to do is just to say, look, if money wasn't an issue, what would you do here? Would you do this? Would you do that? How much would you want to invest in this kind of project? And it gives you an indication of what their appetite is for, the upside, or what their biggest hope for the outcome is, or what their biggest hope for the business or whatever is. So by understanding if money was not an object, that they could make some decisions around their business that would be much more impactful. It might get them into an area of thinking where they're not as worried about, cost as a barrier to being able to achieve those things. If they were to spend that money, it allows them to think and kind of brainstorm what would the outcome be. So for example, if I'm going to invest in marketing, let's say, that I would have an upside of this result. And you can kind of communicate to say, well, below a certain threshold of service or product, you're not actually going to get the value return, and you actually need to be spending around this much in order to make it worth your while. And I think that sometimes people just go, I tried to sell the thing, they said no, I walk out, and that's the end of it. Sales should really be a negotiation to see what's the best value for all parties involved. So the idea of having everybody with some level of outcome that is beneficial, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've just won the cheapest price. You also need to deliver a valuable service that's worth your time and worth your time to serve them with enough focus to not worry about other projects. So if it doesn't work for you, just say, look, this doesn't work for me and this is why. And I think that pragmatic approach builds more trust and builds more credibility than for you to get just emotionally charged about how much money this is costing you. So you can discover some of these sales levers if you just ask a little bit more bigger, zoom outy sort of hypothetical questions. So if you could do anything, where would your business be in the next 3 to 5 years? And that will give you an indication of, are they growth hungry? Are they looking to wind down? Are they just trying to survive? Where is their business at? And then that will help you tailor a better solution to fit them and their budget. And also give you an idea of the level of risk that if I go and provide services to this company, are they going to go broke halfway through? So you don't want to go and create a risky situation for yourself just as much as you don't want to create a risky situation for them in trying to afford your expensive product or service. I think it's also a really good idea to go in with good, better, best pricing. So if you create a number of options in the way that that package can be delivered, then it can reduce the objections, make it much faster because they can go, oh, I'll just pick the middle one or pick the bottom one, or you're a bit low, so we'll go the top one. But if you never had an expensive product on your sales page, have one that seems out of reach for them to say, this is the ultimate, this is kind of what you're looking at, that's the mid-range, and then here's one that's slightly cheaper. So the cheap one should be excellent value for you, the mid one should be just about right, and the big one is wild and crazy and a little bit out there. But if you never had it, they'd never buy it. So make sure you have a big, expensive product in your repertoire somewhere. Don't just rely on having micro products and a lot of them, because you don't really have that game-changing thing. Someone out there, it's right for them. They're going to pick up their service and they're going to pay, 50, 100 grand, 200 grand, whatever your service is and whatever level it is, it's going to be right for someone. So you need to try and have a look and be creative in the way that you present your proposals. So an option A, B, and C, 1, 2, 3, bronze, silver, gold, is a great way to identify where you're hitting in the market as well. You maybe do 5 or 10 sales proposals, and most of the time you're selling the top one. Maybe your proposal frame, your set, like your bottom tier and top tier, are in general too low. That allows you to bring up your pricing, bring up your product quality, and go to market in a better way. Remember in the sales process to always be a little bit reflective in what you're saying. So if they've told you a whole bunch of things, you've asked a whole bunch of questions, and then you confirm that and you say, you're saying this and what I'm hearing is that. So perhaps you're saying that you don't have the budget, but I'm also hearing that this is really, really important for you. And that if you don't get it, it's actually going to cost you more in the long run. So understanding your budget, how can we be a little bit more creative to see how we can make this work. Maybe there's a payment plan. Maybe there's a change in deal structure. Maybe we phase it out. Maybe there's something that will get that over the line so that it's mutually beneficial for both parties. Doesn't mean you should do it cheaper. Doesn't mean you should discount. Maybe just means you change the structure of the deal so that everybody still wins and nobody is damaged. Getting back to that idea of budget and, sales levers and negotiating and things like that, remembering that the pragmatic approach works best. So if someone says, can you do it for less? You can say, well, I could do it for more, or I could change the product, or I can space out the phasing of it. But at that same token, if they're asking you to do it for less, then they're kind of valuing your time less. And you could say, well, look, if I did it for that price, you would not have my focus. You would not be in the line to get that product the way, or the service the way you expected to get it, because I have more valuable things to do over here. So would you prefer that I have my focus, I get it done really good quality really quickly for you? Or do you want me to water down the quality of what I deliver to meet what we determine is the equivalent value? Another thing that reflective listening does, it allows you to really understand the pulse of the situation. So I'm hearing this, is that right? And they will give you some feedback to make sure that you're on track. And you want to make sure that you don't sit there and talk and talk and talk, and then you offer a solution. That's not what they're after. If you maybe ask questions, talk through that, get to the next, is that right? Did I hear you correctly? And once they've confirmed that, or no, let's get back on track here, you're going to have a much better recommended solution at the outcome. If you have a fixed product or service and the sales call is really just about getting them across the line, well, it just gives you a better indication on how that sales call is going, and if you're on track and you're answering the questions correctly, or if you need to refocus and come at it at a different way. Sometimes people can be a little bit standoffish in a sales call and not really give you a lot of information. And again, going back to the pragmatic approach, is just to call it out and say, I feel like there's something you're not telling me. Or is there any question that is the right question that I haven't asked yet? Put it back on them, and they'll have a think and say, well, I have this issue over here, or something completely off guard. Maybe there's a personal situation that's got them thinking about something else. You don't know. And so ideally, you want to meet at their level. You want to be having a one-to-one conversation. You want to be friendly. You want to be human. And when you ask that, they're more likely to give you an honest answer. Whereas if you're trying to force them through the situation and you're trying to be, loud and boisterous and it's like this, yes, like that continual yes psychology, again, it's a dirty trick and it doesn't really come out the way you think or the way you intend it to. And if you're not on track with what it is that you're selling them, you can just say, what would you suggest? Ask them for their opinion, and they're going to give you the answers, particularly if you're asking open questions. So you need this, is that right? That's a yes or no. That's a closed question. That's not really going to give you any more information. Instead, if you say, what do you need? It gives you much more room for a full open answer and a long answer that may yield results that you don't expect. Now, one thing I do like in the sales process is maybe a little bit of a presumptive close. Like if the conversation's going positively, it's almost safe to assume that the sale is going to go ahead. Or you can ask a simple question, and that is, what would you like to do next? When you've answered so many questions and it just seems obvious that they need to buy your product, they can't help but say, well, let's book the next meeting in. Maybe you can just say, as a presumptive close, you can say, so would you like to book in a kickoff call next week? I've got time here. What about you? And they might go, oh, well, no, hold on. I need to run it by this person. Be like, cool. Why don't we get that person on the phone now? Or why don't we book a meeting with them together on that date? And then that way we can talk through any questions that they have. Because again, you don't want to do it by proxy. You don't want to do it through the voice of somebody else who has summarized and watered down your message and put it into their own terms that may not come across as well. So ideally, if you can go direct to source and you can be the voice who is providing the information as to why they should close, then you can have a much better chance of getting the deal over the line than if you were doing it through hearsay. Now, when you do ask the question, so what would you like to do next? You just be quiet. Don't say anything. You give them the time and the space to process and you just look there, calm, and smile, talk to them, or smile and wait for them to answer your question. What would you like to do next? It's a pretty open question. If the answer is, well, of course we're going to go ahead with the service, then that will come out. If it's going to take them time, quite often they're waiting for the next thing that you're going to say or the next pitch they're going to say. So if you just give them the space, they're going to process it. And, it could get really awkward. At times it could be for like a minute, 2 minutes, and nothing has been said. And they go, are you there? And you go, yeah, I'm still here. That's it. That's all. You just answer them. And maybe you can restate if you so desire. So what would you like to do next? And, ideally they'll arrive to it. That's probably the most salesy trick, which is really stop talking and listen. And I think that's true of all sales, or through the entire sales conversation, is you're there to help guide. You're not there to sell per se. Sales is guidance. It's not forcing people to do a particular thing. You're not trying to shove it in their pocket and rob their money out the other side without them realizing it. You're trying to get them to arrive at the decision themselves. So in summary, the best salespeople use questions to get information out of the customer, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, dealing with objections before they become a problem, and getting the agreement of the customer that, yes, this is a good idea, let's move forward. And then finally, asking for the sale. What would you like to do next? Give them the power to make the decision, I'm going to do this. And then instead of them feeling like they've said yes and caved into something, they feel like they've made the decision to go ahead. Yes, let's do this thing. So that's it for today. Keep an eye out for the next lesson. Thank you for watching. You take care.